My braid is flashing bird.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And today I have joining me Bennett Young, who I'm sure that anybody that, watches a decent amount of combat robotics knows who he is, has been on BattleBots teams, most recently on Team Mammoth, and also has some amazing robots at NHRL. So welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
I know that earlier this year you were on Behind the Bots, so this is going to be a tough act to follow. But I will do my best. So let's, first of all, now that the BattleBot season is wrapped up, I mean, this wasn't your first time at BattleBot, so wasn't like a new thing for you, but how was it being at World Championship VII, which for me was one of the best seasons of BattleBots, if not the best season of BattleBots ever?
Let's see. So in my case, I started a new job. So that means that I didn't have a ton of vacation time. So I was sort of limited there. So I sort of had to spend like about half of my vacation time or so, probably a little more than that, just to be there for like the central week of filming. So like if you go to the website, you won't see me there. I promise I was there. I just had to get there late. For competition wise, a lot of the work we did was prepping for the season. So that was pretty intense, I think, as always. But I think when we arrived, it was sort of familiar because I sort of got into the rhythm of like BattleBotsing now. I think the most exciting thing though was when we were approaching the end and sort of saw the tournament shaping up. I like to come there during the mornings. It's like when before filming begins, get some time in the morning, things are sort of quiet still. And the day when they announced the tournament, I was kind of like, oh, okay. And I ran with this and I was like, oh, that hurts a little. That hurts. But we still have more fights in like the Golden Bolt or just general exhibition fights. Do a couple of those as well. Or not they show, and we'll see. But there's still a lot of opportunities. But I think the main thing was when the season had passed and I learned who won, I was like, oh, I really want to fight them now. Like now I really want to like test. Because like when the West Coasters win it, I don't get to see them very often or much at all in some cases. So it's like I can really compare. Like when Ray or Paul wins, it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to like fight them anytime soon, really. Maybe like Ray's 12-pounder, but I'm not going to have like a heavyweight to fight Tombstone with. But like with JMO, I was like, oh, I fought Megatron. I've been beat by Megatron. I want to really fight Megatron now. And then with Jonathan, I never actually fought Huge yet. But I'm like, okay, now I definitely want to fight Huge because like they're right over there. I could fight him. So there was a lot of initial sort of excitement of like, okay, now I really want to Norwalk because now I really want to fight the two best people who are just so happen to also be in the West Coast. And then like David and Ribot, they're also here. And then Copperhead, like Luke, they visit occasionally as well. So whenever I get a chance to fight all of them, it's kind of like, okay, like I know they're really good. I fought with them for years, but now it's like, now they're really good. Like the social game's so high. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. I mean, after all of this happened, I mean, really what this equals is now everybody wants to fight JMO. So
yeah, I do not envy him there.
He's gonna have to be prepared for a lot of challenges, I think. So yeah, I mean, it really, I think that's one of the things that made it such a great season. I mean, at this point, there's more and more NHRL representation at the BattleBots level. I mean, you can look at so many of the teams, and that's there. So I think that was a big theme, and then also just the meta breaking aspect of the season with all of these bots going so far and having really good seasons who aren't 4-wheel drive verts.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think like the cheers that echoed in the pits when Ripperoni was doing well, like thunderous. Like I've never like felt the earth shake from someone chanting pizza, but like everyone was chanting pizza. And then like when Huge was like going through all the vertical spinners, we're like, finally, Huge is doing what it's supposed to do. It's like killing all the 4-wheel drive vertical spinners. No offense to all of you guys. They're pretty cool too, but you know, that's life. But like when Saw Blaze, I think everyone sort of always feels it. It's not because Saw Blaze's design is inherently very easy to make, but it's because Jameson is such a competent builder that we expect, therefore, to make that design to a level that's really good. I remember, like, even just, I think, like, little discussions like Aaron, a little bit, like, with Tantrum, but he also pointed about Saw Blaze, the ability to, like, have the defense retract of your weapon so you can just tank every shot, but then also the ability to, like, attack something with it, very critical. I think that was, like, a huge thing about Saw Blaze everyone recognized, but just hadn't figured out the formula and make it work. But as Jameson, like, the past, I'd say, like, really 3 seasons or so, like, he's gotten it, like, pretty tuned, like, just a little bit more. And then as he got to the little changes, mainly the wheels, I think, like, a huge one there, and then the fork shape, like, those little things made sure it's like, okay, like, this is not only not a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner, but actually the presence of it terrifies 4-wheel drive vertical spinners, because now it's like a good counter to them. I think that was the big demonstration between, like, all the fights. Like, Jameson beat, like, a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner with Saw Blaze to get into the final. Huge ate, like, the best 4-wheel drive vertical spinners in the game to make it to the finals. And so not only does it force them to change and sort of evolve, which is good, because I think even if the design's very effective and very solid, it still has to keep innovating, otherwise it becomes too boring. It also makes other builders have to think differently now. So, like, one of the beautiful things about, like, Mammoth, I know, which is very, very fun, is, like, Mammoth is actually really good to fight Huge and Starchild. And that's a robot that doesn't do well against the 4-wheel drive vertical spinners. Like, yeah, killed by Witch Doctor. But when we fight against the other meta-breaking robots, it's another interesting game of, like, okay, well, we're not optimized for those guys. We can really do well against those guys. So I think builders sort of have to now think about that more with the designs. Because I think if more hammer saws show up, more big wheel bots start showing up, we're going to see more designs that are not just another tank to handle 4-wheel drive vertical spinners, but it might get to a point where it's like, okay, I need to think about Huge just as likely as I would think about Witch Doctor to fight. Or I need to think about Saw Blaze just as much I have to think about, like, Tombstone to fight. And I think that's a very good part for the sport, because I think that allows more diverse designs, and I think less cases of the basic shape machines sort of shaping out like one sort of like general boxy thing, but more dynamic in their ideas. So it's pretty good. And I think it'd be pretty fun. I think we should see him the fastest at, like, Norwalks. Like, I think now probably into, like, the August to the finals and beginning of next year, probably more variations like that too.
Yes, which I think is very exciting. I'm kind of with you. We're like, I have a lot of appreciation for 4-wheel drive vertical spinners, but while that's the case, I still like to see just crazy stuff, do well that doesn't traditionally do well, because I think it's good for the sport. I mean, I think for people that just are peripherally interested, that, don't really get into it normally, they're like, hey, that thing's cool. I want to see what it does. I think that would be, good moving forward if we see more of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now let's talk about your robots. And you have quite a few of them. Obviously some more well known than others, and you definitely are making an impact in the 30-pound category for sure. Now, for this upcoming event, first of all, just briefly to kind of touch on Demogorgon, because I know it's not going to be at that event. You did compete with it in May, so what's the situation on that one right now and moving forward?
Sure. So Demogorgon is probably the first bot I brought to NHRL. I think it was there in, like, February of 21. And that was probably, like, the earliest learning robot from NHRL experience I can look at and, like, see the arc of it continue. That was actually conceived of because Big Dill fought Rotator back in 2020. And I think the best way to learn about a robot is to build a mini version of it. So I made Demogorgon. And while I couldn't really make it the same rotatory shape, it still was a good learning about how to make a very strong system. But in the past event in May, even though I fought Blue Cheese, which of course meant that it was untelevised, Blue Cheese is, like, one of the worst robots to fight with it because its massive blade uppercuts the disc. And the point of the undercutter is to really be sort of like a thin sort of cutting thing. So that means it's on the bottom of the robot. So if it gets punched upwards, it goes into the frame, which is super duper strong. But when it's fighting a bot like Blue Cheese, the very thick weapon in particular, that means that my blade gets risk of being bent. And if the blade gets bent on an undercutter, it now wants to cut up into the body and like cut its own nose off, which is very, very bad. So with Demogorgon, it lost to Blue Cheese, and then it lost to, I believe, Baka was the robot, also from the University of Cincinnati, who made like Maximizer and all of them. I looked at it, I thought, okay, like it's a solid machine in that its chassis is really, really strong, but I really need to change some stuff because I think the way metas are working for the horizontals is you had to have a very thick disc to expect the bending. One of the big benefits we've had in recent years is we have like CNC services from China and even some stateside like Sencut Sen, which have been really, really good to make like very, very strong robots for very, very cheap. And so with that, you can have these four-wheel drive vertical spinners sort of with a very thick single tooth. So like the Witch Doctor-esque sort of like singular horn is becoming more and more popular. And with Prime Head in particular, hi Zach, I'm always scared of that robot bending my blade because they're just like thin cutting things. They're not meant to take a big uppercut shot. So with Demogorgon, I've been working on I guess it'd be a V2 technically because the same base has been around for a while, just different other shapes to it. And this one actually is I'm gonna go with a much thicker weapon, sort of like a mid cutter. So with that machine, the way I sort of have it sort of designed out, it's supposed to use phenomenons up and just turn sideways. And then you have the drive base around it to sort of move it around. And the thinking is that, well, phenomenon's a 30-pounder and it hasn't broken yet. So it can probably take like a prime header shot, probably still live. So that's the game I'm trying to play. If Phenomenon's weapon breaks by being punched sideways by Prime Hedda, it's probably not a good thing in the first place. But I think sort of a stout weapon horizontal is the goal. And the thing with a lot of my robots is I have so many ideas I want to try, but so little of them I can do at a time because they're money. So I'm probably going to keep cycling Demogorgon in during the year. So like in the May event is paired with Fracas in terms of fighting. And it's probably going to keep moving around as well down the line. So like, if not in August, probably in like whatever event comes after that one. And then if it qualifies for finals, yay. If it doesn't, probably be like the first event next year, something like that. But it's going to stay around. It just sort of waxes and wanes. And because it hasn't had great success recently, it's going to probably take some time to like figure it all out again.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so that would be after August would be September. There's back-to-back months
Oh my goodness.
in terms of events. So yeah, that should be a really good event. I've heard, that last one before the championships and everything is really a competitive one because everybody's trying to qualify. So
yeah,
which is why I thought it would be a good idea for me to bring my new bot to that event. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, easy peasy, beat them all. Every single one that lost earlier, you just take them all out, 100%. Not even a problem.
Exactly. So yeah, well, that should be fun. So for the June event, of course, you are bringing Phenomenon, and you are also bringing Vorion. So talk about that.
Let's see. So Phenomenon's the classic. It's the one that just doesn't die. One of the main things about Phenomenon, which is really impressive with it, is the chassis and shape have been identical since it first showed up in, I think, March of 21. So it's going on 3 years and probably had like 20-something fights, which is absurd for like a 30-pounder because with BattleBots and Featherweights, they both sort of have like the physics that work on them is closer. So that means with a BattleBot, you don't have things like sort of bend and then bounce like a Beetleweight does. Things begin to just bend or break or just shatter on impacts. And so with Featherweights, it's a similar case where if you run a Featherweight too long and you get really big shots, the robot doesn't just like bounce around the box. It bends or cracks on a certain shot. And so it's been surprising about Phenomenon is that even though it's had all these matches, its chassis has never even once been bent. And it's now fought like, besides Verts, it's fought against Depth Charge, Big Cookie, probably more as well. It's probably going to, and Four Letter Word. Those are three. that are like really strong horizontals. I was like, oh, it's going to bend something. The robot has not even like sweated yet in terms of strength. And that's insane. Like the failures in the robot is only because the shock is so high that the drivetrain gets knocked out, or the weapon pulley on the motor moves off the motor shaft and gets hit by the blade. So it's never actually the chassis failing. It's just the parts inside of it that are all soft and squishy. So Phenomenon just keeps on running. And a lot of that is because since the robot's so strong, I'm sort of honing on reliability there. The next things to do are attachments. We all play in the ground game. We're living in a fork world, so we have to play that to some degree. I think the last couple times that robot's done well, it's just been down to the forks. I know, like, probably the best example of it is when it fought against other Disco, and like the two robots are about the same in function, but I just had forks and he didn't. And Phenomenon just kept peeling up the front wedges on Disco and thrusting it over backwards. And I'm sure Don's going to get me back for that at some point. He's too smart not to. And I dread the day. But I know that was like a very key thing. And then the flip side of that is against Megatron. Because first of all, he set me on fire in like December 21. So like I've never forgotten that. And every single time I see it, I'm just like, he set me on fire. I need to pay him back for that. And so in that case, it is 100% the forks. In its most recent outing in March against Megatron, one of the big things that was rough about Phenomenon going into the fight is when it fought Tsunami earlier in the day, it bent the fork assembly. So I only had one fork to like do it. And so even though in theory at least, the long fork sort of like touches Megatron first, so he couldn't like get into me, I also can't touch him with the blade because the blade's still hidden back behind the wedge in the forks. And a lot of times in my downtime, really all the time actually, I'm watching old BattleBots fights because I'm trying to analyze the physics of what's going on. And the most clear example I've ever seen is Cobalt versus Minotaur, because when I fought against Yahoo back in sometime last year, probably September last year, I think, or something like that. When I fought against him, he's the Minotaur in this case, obviously. But Phenomenon, even though it's a little better in that it has a bit more reach than Cobalt does, still has to suffer the blade behind the wedge. You still have to get him up the wedge into the weapon for it to punch anything. And that's sort of the big limit of vertical spinners that I have. And so Vorion actually is just the best way to describe Vorion is it is actually version 2 Phenomenon, with the only difference being that its blade's exposed and Phenomenon's isn't. So after the December finals last year, Phenomenon had I had a whole new design designed up, and the goal was to run it at Motorama this year in February. The problem was the logistics didn't work out, so I had to run the classic Phenomenon. But classic Phenomenon did so well, I was like, oh, well, I'm just gonna keep running it then. And so here we are to this day. But I still had like a whole second robot's worth of parts sitting around. So I'm like, okay, I can either retire Phenomenon or this classic Phenomenon and run this as the new Phenomenon. And therefore I have 2 sets of Phenomenon sitting back. I thought it wasn't wise because now I have a whole set of chassis over there that aren't doing anything, but they're still plenty functional and have way too many spares for them. But I also have this other new robot. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take Phenomenon 2 and make one of them. And I'm going to make it called Vorion. And the whole purpose of Vorion then is essentially be like a Silent X, but not as obviously X-y. I did not want to like Phenomenon X, for example. And to make a robot that's very similar to Phenomenon, but it's should be in theory improved reliability. The blade's more exposed, so it's to be able to actually like hit somebody more obviously. And then the maintainability as well. Because there are parts of Phenomenon which were made before I learned anything. Version 1 is never as good as version 2. But with the lessons learned from version 1, it's a lot easier to fix it. So in theory, Vorion, in my expectations, should be way more damaging than actual Phenomenon is. So if Phenomenon does good, Vorion should do better. And so I felt a little bad going into the event because, like, for new 30-pounders, right, you sort of had the idea, like, okay, we're going to sort of work it out. But, like, Vorion should actually be better than Phenomenon. So it's like I just dropped Phenomenon into the unseeded rounds in the first round for somebody to fight. And I kind of feel a little bad because I can see someone showing up with a weapon like a robot and thinking, okay, it's a new idea, and they just draw like worst phenomenon, and they're like, oh darn, and just like implodes it in the first match. We're gonna have to see, of course, because I can't really test it anywhere, and it is new, so it's definitely gonna have some bugs. But it's the goal of the robot is to learn, and I think that's the trick. I think Jameson highlighted a lot of times in his interviews, been going through all of the media now with him being present everywhere. And his points is accurate. A lot of robot is iteration and learning. And the point of Vorion is to do exactly that. It's to learn a ton about how to develop a good vertical spinner. The same vein as Phenomenon, but slightly better. So maybe one day Phenomenon just retires once it's probably beaten by somebody else. Maybe set on fire again, JMO. Or and Vorion just takes over as like the main thing, But that's the goal. The goal is to sort of learn with it. And so we're gonna see.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and you never know. Sometimes these projects where you think it's like, I think Andrea from Witch Doctor put this really well in one of the interviews during BattleBots, where she had mentioned that they thought this was going to be like a learning season with the changes that they made to Witch Doctor, but Witch Doctor actually did really well. So you never know how it's going to pan out when you think it's just a learning thing. It could win.
That's the goal. That's the dream.
Yeah, it would be awesome. Now, there is a question that I have posed in a lot of the group interviews, but I feel like you're a great person to ask this question too, because I'm very curious to hear what your answer would be. That in the event that you had an unlimited amount of money and resources to build any robot at any weight class, what would you do?
Oh, it's actually a very good question because I've already been working on that exact answer already. So the main thing is, if anyone's curious, you look up a robot called Cattywampus. It's a little beetle weight I made for the sportsman competitions, the events in Maryland, the macro group down here. It's a robot where I have a very simple idea. See, you take a motor with a gear motor, lots and lots of power into a gearbox, right? And you can do the Ramplan waves, like a waggle stick on the side of it. It tilts the robot sideways, and it sort of moves up and down, but it's sort of in line with the robot. What I did is I actually put the motor on the back of the robot instead. So that way it sort of turns like this instead. And the logic here is that if someone gets on top of my robot, I drive underneath of them, the arm is still exposed. It can still move like this. So in theory, it should just turn you sideways because it reinverts my robot. Additionally, the main goal of that robot then is to also have 300 to be able to freely move at any point. So one thing you don't really think about with robots, perhaps, is what happens when you get pinned. So, like if Saw Blaze traps you in a wall, or let's say Witch Doctor's running you into the wall, trying to blow you up or something, what can you do? Most people think, well, I'm going to drive backwards. I know with Hydra, they have like a spare set of wheels in the back of the robot, just sort of pulls it backwards really fast and allows it to escape. With Cattywampus, and you can actually look up YouTube videos for it, it throws itself across the arena to do this. And so the thinking is that now you can't actually contain my robot. And if anything, if I can move to a point like behind you that you just can't react to, I could punch you really fast. It could be a really hard counter. And so that robot general idea is actually take the Cattywampus idea and scale to probably a 30-pound class than heavyweight class. I think it'd be a nice compliment to Mammoth in terms of just like weird but kind of crazy but kind of cool. But it's just a lot of money, and I can't afford it. But if I had unlimited money, it's all good. But the goal of Cattywampus is sort of use that movement ability, because it's an underrated but a very important thing. Because with the fork world, as soon as you're on the forks, you're just dead. You're just waiting to get released. But if you're at any point in time able to move or escape, that first of all is cool to watch because your robot's just like tossing everywhere and around. But it's also really tactically hard to control, because if your whole game plan is to trap me, but if I can escape at any point in time, you really have to just either have a very aggressive weapon where it's sort of always able to hit or strike really fast with it, or you're not ready and I can hit you somewhere you don't expect and you get hit with it. So that was the main thing about Cattywampus. And so that's actually one of the designs I'd really love to build for an NHRL, but I'm limited because I don't have endless money. Well, in this case, I guess we do. But also just too many designs to run. I just have Phenomenon, and now it's like sibling twin and Fracas over there, and then Demogorgon, and then other designs for those. But I'm trying to figure out ways to make a scaled up Kiting Wampus, because I think it would just be so weird to sort of watch, but so cool in the process of doing it. And I think if its idea flushes out completely, it actually could change the way you'd like understand how control works in BattleBots and understand sort of how the pace of the game works out. And I think that's pretty cool, but we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully I'll post more on my socials.
Yes, that does sound very interesting, and I would be completely on board with that idea. That's if I had unlimited money, I would just give it to builders who have crazy ideas like that. Tell Tom Farkas, make it 250-pound positively hysterical, like do that tomorrow. That's the kind of stuff that I would do. That's terrific. So yeah, June event coming up, and then I know you said that possibly September for Demogorgon. That sounds like a lot of fun stuff to come. Are there any other, do you primarily do just the Norwalk and Motorama, or are there any other events that you kind of have planned coming up in the near future?
I have a lot of small events going on too. This coming weekend being June 10, there's the macro competitions, right? My 1-pounders. And my 1-pounders are just one's a lifter. I love lifters. So like Fracas' suplexing ability is based off of that, first of all, as well as Claw Viper. And second is a little saw. I actually call it a saw fuffle because it's a mixture of my robot kerfuffle and then saw, because it's saw. And so I do those all the time. Those tend to sort of spread themselves out between events. Any other events locally I would go to more. In the before times before the plague, NERC had the Franklin Institute event. I'd go to that all the time. There's the Bop Blast event in Bloomsburg, which is, it's passed its own way. One reaching goal, which I'm trying to aim for, but we're going to see because it depends on timing or such, is actually to go compete in the UK. I have a friend who's stationed in, who's going to be stationed in London, part of government work and all of that. And so one of the goals of visiting him actually is to bring probably Fracas with me to go fight in the UK in one of the Bristol Bot Builders events, the BEVs event. And so the goal is that, it's non-kinetic. It can lift and suplex. I think people love lifting and suplexing robots. But at the same time, I want to meet the British scene because the thing about robot combat I really love is people think differently about the exact same problem. And so I imagine the Brits have very fun, interesting ways of dealing with something, which I've been able to sort of, watch on YouTube. I study them as well. But it's a little different because they don't have the same arena style. Maybe like the goals of like what do we want to accomplish in this fight, maybe a little different as well. Like they have lots of flippers and we have like a blip. So we're very, very different in the way like we do stuff. And so in general, it's exploration that way. Might try to go to California as well. I know they have their Scar 30-pound box. And I think Phenomenon probably like have a fun time sort of exploring that out. Never fought on steel before, so that'd be kind of cool if I could see how that works. Hoping to avoid magnets, but we'll see. But I think it'd be kind of cool. So I definitely want to do lots of events if possible. Certainly trying out as many things as I can with the bots I have. NHRL is still probably the base now. I think just having regularly scheduled events, particularly such like well-trodden ground at this point, I think it's really a solid basis of it. But if I can see other people who have fought many different ways, that's great. I want to fight everybody if I can. I want to fight them because they can teach me something about the robot I did not know before. Or better yet, they're just cool people. And I just kind of want to meet them because I don't get to see them very often, if at all. So stuff like that.
Awesome. I love the competitive spirit. It's a blend, and I think that's like the healthiest way to enjoy combat robotics is, have that competitive spirit, but at the same time, like have fun. I think there's plenty of room for both. So
absolutely. You gotta have some fun with it, because if it gets too intense, you end up with two similar robots. It's kind of like the Formula One question. Because on one level, BattleBots could easily become Formula One if you let like endless money and just pure competitivity come into the game. But in the same time, you know that as soon as that happens, the joy of the fight loses or it gets gone. I think like the best example people tend to think about is like when Ribot and Hydra were sort of having like their square off with the forks there. Like in terms of raw competitivity, it was tactically a very patient fight. And I know as a builder watching it, I was like, this is high tension. The excitement's there because I know what's going to happen if one of them messes up. But in the same time, if you're an audience member, you're just like, they've moved 2 inches in the past minute and 30 seconds. What's happening? Where's the flips? Where are the sparks? This is boring. I'm going to snooze. I'm changing the channel. Like, like that's what you sort of end up having. And so we don't have a bot that is either dynamic and like fast and, you know, quick moving and things like that. But you just sort of optimize to be the most damaging you can. It's not going to be as good. I know like arena design's a good thing. I come from an RC car background even before robots. So like imagine a dirt arena. That'd be so cool. Imagine if like jumps into it. You could just like have a Hypershock-esque like robot that just like zooms around, jumps, and like lands on top of the other robot. Kind of sick, just saying. But it's a lot of work to do that. It's a lot of work. And then like in Norwalk, I have Fracas, which is the sole purpose of that machine is like control. It would get murdered by Phenomenon if I fought them against each other. That or their forks would like interlock and just sit there for like 3 minutes and do nothing. But it exists because people love suplexes, because it's really cool when I just take you and just go whoop and you're on your back, and what can you do about it? It's like a very like human related experience, I guess you could say, like suplexing somebody, even if I've done it myself, that you could sort of relate to. But like the flywheel death hum of a vertical spinner is still also really cool, so you don't let them go away. But balance is important. Too much of spinners doesn't get you the most fun, and just control bots and no spinners, I don't think gives you the level of competitivity that you want to make it still like intense.
Yes, exactly. That is so well put. Because I think that, you know, some people may have difficulty understanding why I get just as excited hearing Minotaur's drum spin up and like watching them just destroy people as I do watching Slammo suplex someone. Both are very exciting.
Love that. Slammo is great for that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, I'm excited to see what happens for you at the June event and the rest of this year. And, you know, obviously like into the future, because I think that you are a really solid builder, and, you know, I will love to see more of what you do.
Thank you very much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be on here.
Absolutely. You know, for anybody that's watching, obviously, please make sure that you continue to support Combat Robotics. Like, subscribe, you know, comment, all of that good stuff. Let me know who else you want to see on the show, and I will do my best to make it happen. But just keep watching, and we'll see everyone next time on the show.
See ya.